Wherever there is river blindness, there is the Mektazan donation program and its partners. Governments, agencies, NGOs and countless individuals dedicated to the same objective: control and elimination of a centuries-old scourge. 25 years ago, such an ambitious goal would have seemed like nothing more than a dream. But that's changed with a combination of scientific discovery, visionary leadership, and extraordinary commitment. River blindness, which is also known as onchocerciasis, is one of the world's leading causes of preventable blindness. The World Health Organization estimates there are more than 100 million people at risk, with 37 million infected, 800,000 visually impaired, and 270,000 blind. And millions more silently suffering from unbearable itching. The scars speak for themselves. For centuries, the disease plagued remote communities in Africa, Latin America and the Middle East. There was no answer to the affliction. Many people considered it a curse. And even those who escaped its symptoms still suffered its effects. Farmland near rivers was abandoned, productivity suffered, and children had to give up school to look after stricken members of their families. One of the worst affected areas is Taraba State in eastern Nigeria. Just reaching endemic communities is a challenge, taking many hours by air, road, river and trail. But those willing to make the journey never forget. When Francisca Alamiju saw the suffering, she felt compelled to take action. She set up a non-profit charity called Mitosat, which runs prevention and rehabilitation programs in Nigeria.
The fight against river blindness is not just a health fight. It's a fight against poverty. And it has to be integrated and it has to be concerted effort by multiple partners. So for them, once they go blind, it's a challenge socially and economically, and it affects the education of their children as well.
What Francisca saw shocked us as well. In this community, it seems like an entire generation lost its sight years ago, before the Mektazan donation program began. Even the chief wasn't spared. He says that when he first felt discomfort in his eyes about 30 years ago, he went to the hospital, which was far away. When he got there, the staff were on strike, so he went to a natural healer instead, who gave him native medicine. It didn't work, and his case is typical. Everywhere you turn, elderly villagers live in darkness. And there was an eerily familiar sight, the classic image of river blindness, children leading a blind adult by a stick. The partnership is relegating this image to the annals of history, leaving future generations with hope and releasing energy and opportunity which has been stifled for centuries. In Latin America, there is cause for celebration. Efforts to eliminate transmission of river blindness have been enormously successful. Transmission is thought to be interrupted or eliminated in 4 of the region's 6 endemic countries. Here in the hills of Chiapas, one of Mexico's poorest states, An entire community has turned out to educate, role play and give thanks for the progress they've made. Yet Chiapas, like so many other endemic areas, is not an easy place to execute a major public health campaign.
They are usually in the very highly remote areas, and that is what makes it difficult to reach and creates a difficulty in the operation. That sometimes people outside of the program, they don't think about the amount of people that have to receive treatment, but not in the difficulties to reach those areas to be able to distribute those few treatments that sometimes you have to be given. That is a big challenge.
Mucho gusto. Bueno, pues.
Dr. Mauricio Sabre is the director of OAPA, the onchocerciasis elimination program for the Americas, which runs the operation here under the auspices of the Carter Center. Filmed during one of the last distribution campaigns in Chiapas, strict procedures are followed to ensure maximum effect. First, each patient checks in at the registry where their information is recorded. Next, their height is measured, which determines how many Mectizan tablets will be given. Then the person must take the treatment while being directly observed. Finally, they're examined for nodules, a telltale sign of the disease. The absence of nodules is a good sign that the disease has been controlled. Distribution campaigns typically take place once, sometimes twice a year. Here, following an aggressive campaign culminating in 4 treatments a year, the results are in. Treatment is no longer needed here. Whether it's in the Americas, Africa or Yemen, an enormous amount of planning is required for a distribution campaign. Communities and workers must be mobilized. The partners, including the Ministry of Health and local and international agencies, must coordinate their efforts. And of course, the key ingredient, Mectizan, must be ordered in precise amounts and shipped to the right place at the right time. Meeting all of the needs for distribution can be enormously challenging. Here in northern Ecuador, rivers snake deep into dense jungle. It's prime territory for river blindness, with small communities perched on the water's edge in a tough, isolated existence. The deeper you go upriver, the more rudimentary the healthcare. Raquel Lovato is OAPA's country director here. She says there are 120 rivers in this province alone. The climate is hot and humid, and the people upriver are extremely poor, which leads to 2 important factors contributing to the success of the program.
Un equipo comprometido que distribuya la ivermectina, tampoco, no hubiéramos estado todavía hablando. Una buena razón también es el que hayan sido tabletas que no han tenido que ser refrigeradas y donadas más que todo, porque si hubieran sido que cuesta la tableta, a lo mejor la gente no podía acceder a esta medicación.
Campaigns also couldn't be successful without the help of individuals in each and every community. Edgar Anapa is one of those helpers. He's assisted the Onco program every year since 1988. Only 58 families live in his community of Corriente Grande, but it's played a big role. It's the end of the line on this river. Going deeper into increasingly isolated jungle would be near impossible. Instead, when it was time for drug distribution, word would be sent and people from as much as 8 hours away would make their way here. In another community nearby, Maria Canones remembers the dark days. As a nurse, she worked on the program for many years in her community of Atahualpa.
Ya, muchas mayores morían.
She says people had itchy, swollen skin, and some went blind. When asked whether there were any stricken survivors from those days, Maria says yes, one man. She takes us to the home of Mahaniano Casedo.
¿Cómo se siente?
No me siento muy bien, me siento mal.
His days are spent sitting in his hammock in a dark, sparse room with a radio for company. Mahaniano, who says he's 93 years old, was a farmer until river blindness claimed his sight.
Cuando yo me quedé ciego.
He tells us about the days when members of his family and the community would die blind without knowing the cause. Those days, due to the success of the program and the commitment of the communities, are gone. And there's been a curious development. An evening community meeting in a school downriver. The people want to know about something that's making them nervous. Why the Mectizan is not being distributed anymore. Raquel explains that there have been no new cases. They must remain vigilant and continue monitoring the community, she says. Hopefully, with continued efforts, river blindness will finally be a thing of the past. And it's a checkered past. River blindness, or onchocerciasis, is caused by the bite of black flies of the genus Similium. They breed in fast-flowing rivers where the eggs are laid. When they hatch, they do their damage by biting a human, depositing a parasitic filarial worm, Onchocerca volvulus. In endemic areas, people working in or near rivers can be bitten dozens or even hundreds of times a day. The microfilaria can then migrate to the eye, where they die, resulting in severe inflammation and scarring that can lead to impaired vision and blindness. Another symptom is itching, caused again by dead microfilaria, which provokes inflammation and chronic dermatitis. Unavoidable scratching often causes pigment loss, commonly called leopard skin. The sensation is so severe, it's been described as making people feel suicidal. For centuries, there was no effective prevention or treatment. But in 1975, Dr. William Campbell of MSD Research Laboratories suggested that the company's veterinary drug ivermectin could potentially kill juvenile parasites in humans. Campbell and colleague Dr. Mohammed Aziz felt it could treat river blindness. After years of further research and human trials, followed by swift regulatory approval in Europe, came the big moment. In 1987, the CEO of MSD, Dr. Roy Vagelos, made what would become the biggest drug donation the world has ever seen.
At that meeting, we announced that Merck would contribute the drug free to anyone in the world who needed it for as long as it was needed.
Vagelos had no idea how big the program would get. 25 years, over 1 billion treatments, in more than 117,000 communities. The program has set a new standard, and each CEO since Vagelos has honoured the pledge.
I think people don't understand what an important decision this was that Roy Vagelos and his colleagues made in the mid-1980s. Before that, there had never been a program like this. And the challenge was that many people looking at our business model would say, a company like Merck shouldn't give away drugs because you're opening the door to the argument that you'll have to give them away wherever people can't afford it. But I think Roy Vagelos and his colleagues understood that this was a unique situation where we had in our hands a very powerful medicine, in effect, a way of preventing this kind of blindness, which itself is totally preventable, from afflicting generations of people in the areas of the world that could least afford it. And so they made the decision at that time to make this drug available wherever it's needed for as long as it's needed. That was a commitment by that generation of Merck management. It is a commitment that I'm happy to say on behalf of this generation of Merck management that it's our honor and privilege to actually also observe.
Back to 1987, the pledge to donate Mectizan created an entirely new set of challenges.
Having made the decision, then the issue was, how are we going to get the damn thing distributed?
MSD wasn't in the business of managing global health campaigns. They sought input from Dr. Bill Foege, former CDC director and executive director of the Carter Center at the time. Dr. Foege proposed a novel approach to establish an independent committee of experts drawn from a broad range of global health expertise. The Mectizan Expert Committee and the Mectizan Donation Programme were formed with Dr. Foege at the helm. Their mission? To assess needs and requests from governments, agencies and NGOs, order the drugs, shepherd smooth implementation, assess the outcomes and manage essential partnerships, the funnel through which everything flows. And the partners would grow in number in the coming years. In 1991, the Non-Governmental Development Organization Coordination Group was formed, and more would follow with the help of the WHO, World Bank and Carter Center.
From the big picture point of view, I think it is absolutely amazing to see what a donation has done. It has created the Africa program for onchocerciasis control. It's created the Americas program, the WAPA program, which would never have happened. And even, we talk a lot about community-directed interventions. If there hadn't been APOC, there would not have been community-directed interventions, at least not as they are now, not as far developed, because these were developments that were needed to try and make the whole program sustainable.
Pioneered by the World Health Organization's African Programme for Onchocerciasis Control, or APOC, the community-directed approach has been one of the most innovative and successful initiatives under the programme. It decentralises much of the responsibility for mobilisation and drug distribution and places it in the hands of the communities themselves.
Basically, Ministries of Health realise this community approach is the way forward. It is a major change because it's putting the community in the driving seat, and it actually was quite a major change even for health staff, because it was always the health staff, we're the people with the knowledge, we're the people with the drugs, we tell you what you should do, the drugs you should take, or we give you the drugs you should take. There was that sort of almost paternalistic attitude, if you like, whereas now we're having to work in a partnership way, but the community is being able to become fully involved and make decisions.
In the more than 100,000 communities where Mectizan has been distributed, those measuring height, giving pills, collating the information and going house to house are from those communities. With so many people to reach in such a short period of time, there's no better way to do it.
It's changed the health system, the distribution of this number of drugs to this number of people, and it's done by people in the village. It's not done by people from outside, it's done within. And my own view is that there's much better distribution of drugs in a place like this than there would be in many Western towns. They're better at it here.
When developing the community-directed approach, there were concerns that villagers may have trouble handling the responsibility of distributing Mectizan, or whether they would be motivated. The answer, a resounding yes. Volunteer after volunteer that we spoke to in every country had the same view. They felt good about helping their own communities, and tellingly, they felt empowered.
We have seen really that by engaging the people, the treatment coverage increased significantly, and all the huge successes of APOC that people are mentioning or celebrating today is really centered around that participation of the people and empowering and building trust, showing the community people that we trust them, that they can do it. And that trust is very much well appreciated at that level and at the frontline health facility level, which are very difficult areas for many programs to reach.
The people in the communities are the ones that, when explained what the problem is and how they can act to make their lives better, will take action. We've seen that over and over in the River Blindness Program. It's very, very gratifying. It's very, very empowering for everyone, not just the people there, but for the international community to recognize that this doesn't have to be a paternalistic effort. It should be one of partnership where everyone from the very bottom to the very top can be engaged.
The government ministries and NGOs still play a crucial role, facilitating drug transportation and training, but they and other health programs are taking note.
This is going to be a legacy that this program is going to leave behind, because these people are highly trained to go into the community and establish any kind of public health intervention in those communities.
But even with community support, many of the endemic areas for river blindness are so remote, it's difficult to imagine how they're engaged year in, year out. Then add war to the mix. As if mobilizing geographically and culturally diverse communities isn't enough of a challenge, some endemic countries have been plagued by conflict. The Central African Republic is one of those places. Decades of conflict and political instability have left it almost entirely reliant on international aid. It's a broken country with a health system that is in tatters. It's also a place that MDP director Adrian Hopkins called home for 6 years when he worked for the NGO CBM. He saw firsthand the extremities of triumphs and challenges. While with CBM, Hopkins established the distribution program in the Central African Republic.
Well, all this was the first office. This room and the next room were all our original office when we started the program in 1993.
But when another political crisis arose, he had to leave, and some of the program's helpers were forced to go into hiding. Joseph Yandova was one of them. As a medical professional, he was targeted by the rebels who ransacked all medical facilities, stealing or destroying everything they could.
Je vais faire la pêche. Je fais la pêche. On cherche les rats.
He tells us that he had to flee into the bush with his family, where he lived for 3 months, constantly moving. They lived on rats and fish, anything they could catch. Sometimes, he says, his older children would sneak into town for supplies. But when the rebels were driven out, Yandova not only returned to town, but to his old job, despite being targeted for it. And he's not the only survivor.
These are the different communities, including where we were yesterday.
The records in the Onco office, which had been hidden, made it as well.
This goes back to actually 1993, when he did his very first training. And we prepared what we call a CAP study. It's a study that you do in the population to see what they understand of the disease. And I mentioned before that, you know, one of the taboos here in some villages is to talk of blindness. He's dug this out and showed me the first question there is, have you seen people who are blind? The big mistake we made.
Now with the program running smoothly again, Hopkins takes a philosophical view.
We have built up a system here that is resilient, that's able to bounce back, and I think that's encouraging. So, you know, you can look on the bright side as well as the you know, the fact that we're not as far ahead as we'd like to have been.
In Butong, near Bazangwa, the village has turned out to celebrate the launch of another campaign. The distributors are being briefed on the procedures. Many of them have heard it before and are being recognised for their long-term commitment.
This man has distributed Mectizan every year since 1994. This is a certificate to recognise the work he's done for his community since 1994, signed by the Minister of Health. So it's a real appreciation for the Minister of Health.
In the field, Ruben leads a team through the village, taking notes and showing the younger distributors how it's done. And his experience is valued in other ways. He's been asked to work on the polio program as well, specifically because of his knowledge from the Onco campaign. And that's not the only kind of institutional knowledge that exists in the village. Michel had dreams of working in the health sector, but he gradually went blind and was cast out by his family. His cousin Jacques took Michel in, where he's lived ever since. Michel remembers when Adrian Hopkins visited him in 1993, and indeed the cousins were present when Mectizan was first distributed. In a country in which many health programs are severely neglected, the Onco program has made a remarkable recovery, not least due to the decentralized, community-directed approach, serving as inspiration in a nation that has so little to feel good about.
One of the things I think is important that in the conflict areas, if you can build on peace, people realize, people were talking about it here, yeah, well, we missed treatment for a year or two, but we're very glad we could sort of get back on it. People realize that if there is a certain amount of stability, there is a way of coordinating, cooperating together, getting some good results, and this will benefit them. Then I think we have some sort of hope.
Another groundbreaking facet of the Mectizan donation